Welcome back to Screenwriters Rewatch. We're continuing our journey through IMDb's top 250 film list. In this episode, I'm joined by Alex Butter, and we're here to talk about the 1944 film noir tragedy Double Indemnity. In this discussion, Alex and I will discuss whether or not it deserves its place in film history and in the script department vaults, hidden in the backseat of the Deech Richardson's family car. Welcome back to Screenwriters Rewatch, Alex. Thank you very much for joining me. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me back.
So tell me, what is your relationship with this film?
Um, so this is actually a new watch for me. It's not a film that I sort of knew of growing up. I knew of other film noir sort of tales around sort of Maltese Falcon, The Third Man, and all these the more of the I would say the classic ones. And this is one that sort of passed me by. As I came to it in recent years, I think I've come to appreciate this film uh, after seeing all those different ones. So this is follows Walter Neff is our insurance man who falls in with the sort of femme fatale Phyllis Dietrichson by Barbara Stanwyck, and they plan the murder of her husband and trying to get away with it whilst almost being foiled by his boss, played by Edward. I can't think of the man's name, but he's unlike the other ones. He's not part of a crime. It's not some sort of mob story. It's no sort of where film noir sort of went. It was more surrounded within people who are true criminals. Where this is a man who sort of gets pulled into that world, which is something I feel we now associate with film noir in more of a modern setting. Um, but I think it's really interesting. It really sort of started to deal with situations that hadn't been seen within this genre before. And actually, film noir didn't actually exist as a genre until several years after this film came out. Even though it's sort of been circulating, it wasn't until the French critics started to talk about these films that it sort of get its noir from the darkness from of the stories and the characters and the lighting and how it was actually shot. Um, I mean, this film I think really set a really clear view for film noir. Probably more so, people will say probably Maltese Falcon was one of the first Hollywood noir stories. But I think what Double Indemnity did that the Maltese Falcon didn't do. The Maltese Falcon is a very good PI story, and it's very sort of yeah. Everybody's after the MacGuffin, which is the Maltese Falcon, and you've got all these sort of players that are sort of coming together. But what this one does is sort of really starts to set the mood for noir. It really starts to get it really starts to understand that the characters don't have to be embroiled in a seedy world already, that they can be brought into this sort of dangerous terms. We this is where you really start bringing in the light coming in from the blinds, and the blinds shadow sort of starting to represent almost jail bars, and sort of playing around with the shadow of characters on when they're in certain moods. So there's the bit at the beginning where Walter Neff is walking into his building, about to start his narration, um, and he is in silhouette. It's just darkness. You don't see him at all. Because he's fully transitioned to darkness. And then the first scenes we have of the film, sort of his the flashbacks of his coming up to what is happening. It's daylight. It's beautiful, bright daylight. Everything can be seen, and then throughout the film, it gets darker and darker and darker, and it really starts to represent those different aspects of noir, which I think is something that we've really come to understand now.
Yeah, you're right. This is an incredibly iconic film for the film noir genre. There's quite a lot in here that sets up the key components that make that up. You know, sort of this sort of dark inversion of the character, which is really classic to that genre, and the really passive nature as well. They're easily manipulated, and it's usually, but not always, that's femme fatale that helps really bring that destruction in through this genre. And you get that here with Phyllis in particular. And she's very classic in her approach as well as that character, leading that characteristic. And I think if you didn't know very much about the genre, you would probably watch this and go, well, this is a really passive character. But it serves a purpose because he needs to be carried by this narrative, and it's Phyllis's narrative he gets pulled in by, and I think what really surprised me about it was sort of watching this and understanding that this was, like you mentioned, right in part of the infancy of the beginning of this genre, understanding that this protagonist, all of these protagonists, that they tend to be somebody who's quite reflective. So they're a detective or a writer, and in this instance, he's sort of is an investigator. You know, that's the role he's destined for, but he turns his back on it because of the tragic nature of the genre. And I think understanding that having that protagonist as a reflective person really helps stop because I think you could take film noir and you can caricaturize it, and it can easily become a comedy when you hear the narration over the top. But when you understand that it's a very reflective protagonist and this is how he's telling his story, then it all makes sense. And to sort of see where it all began, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
It's also one of the first films that doesn't have him as the hero. Like even Maltese Falcons, it's Humphrey Bogart. He is the private detective. He is the gun-toting thing. This guy is a womanizing, not the nicest of people. You know, maybe it's like one of the first anti-heroes. It's, you know, it really sort of deals with cinema's sort of masculinity. You know, like it really sort of goes, well, he's not the cool character that we've come to see in cinema. He's actually a bit of a scumbag. And I think that's quite interesting as well. Is, you know, it all culminates together, you know.
Yeah, there's certainly a wider discussion we can have about the representation of both of the genders in this film, and the reflections of this post-war sort of society, expectations of gender, and I think that again that links really well into the structure of a film noir and how it reflects it is of its time that it's standing in. So I'm really looking forward to unpicking this with you in the full-length podcast. So if you want to keep following our discussions here at the Script Department, come and join us over on the podcast. And you can just search for the Script Department wherever you get them. Or you can find the link in the video below. Or even better, just to subscribe and you'll never miss a video with us ever again. But we'll join you very shortly over on the podcast for our full-length discussion. See you there.